All right. Now, last week we looked at, we got to talking about drinking and drugs just a little bit. I want to go back through that real quickly, real hurriedly. We agreed that getting drunken is sinful. We agreed we could drink alcohol for medicinal purposes. And we agreed that if we cause someone to stumble, that we've sinned. So those are, I think, the three keys to understanding alcohol. And my conclusion is this: if I drink socially, I don't have any scripture that authorizes that, but let's assume that it's okay. If I do that, just for the sake of argument, we'll assume it's okay. If I do drink socially and then some other person sees me drinking and then they decide it's okay, and if they happen to be a kind of person that their body becomes addicted to it, then have I not caused that person to sin? And so that's one of my reasons that I leave it alone, for that reason. And also, I think we have to ask ourselves, how does it affect, as I pointed out, how does it affect our influence upon people in the world? Right? So there are a lot of people out there in various religious groups that think that all drinking is sinful, and that's their conclusion. And you won't be able to convert them out of their religious group if you're one that does that. So I think you've got a problem with insiders and outsiders, as I pointed out. And so the only safe thing is to just not drink at all. Just leave it alone, except for medicinal purposes. Okay. Any questions? That's my conclusion. Okay. All right. Let's look further now. We have in chapter 15. Now, it's unfortunate that we have the chapter divisions here, because actuality, this is a continuation of the thought of chapter 14. I think the first about 13 verses will be that. There'll be a continuation of it. And what we have here is, in chapter 14, he calls upon the children of God, the Christians, to sacrifice their liberty for the sake of souls, salvation of souls. Well, now, who would be a better example of sacrificing his liberty for souls, salvation of souls, than Jesus? So I think right here we have to see what he's driving at here. Okay. Any questions or comments? All right. So we're going to start here. Jerry stepped out of the classroom, so I'm going to pick on Tony. No, I'm going to pick on Chris. Chris, I'm going to pick on you because since I slighted you the other night, would you?
You've already made up for it, but I'll take it.
All right. Would you go down, I guess, down to the cursor, if you would, and we'll work off that. Right?
Okay. Ophaleomen de Hamais oi dunatoi ta estenesmata tone adunaton bastazine.
Bastazine. Right. Okay. All right.
I have a we ought, but or now, and that's post positive. So now we ought, or but we ought, we with emphasis, the strong ones, the weaknesses of the ones without strength, to bear or to carry.
All right, to carry or to bear. That's good translation. Anything anybody want to point out? Notice he pointed out Hamas is in that form is emphatic. You caught that. That's good. All right. And the strong. All right. Now, the word odd is interesting, and right here in the notes right here, right in the middle of the screen, if you'll notice, there are two words that are used, and one of them is ophelo, and the other one is dao. Now, the word day in the third person singular is something we covered last night in the Greek class, and that would be impersonal usage of the third person singular. So it's used impersonally. It is necessary. See, it is necessary. It's binding. Now, deo is like you tie someone's hands, right? And ophelo is a debt that you owe. Right here, I have Barry's New Testament synonyms, page 136. Now, I got this out of, if you have a Barry's Interlinear, if you notice, it has a very limited lexicon in the back. And it also has, if you look at it carefully, it has this synonym. And so the synonym part's what I really like. I picked it up and got into the synonyms. And I've even thought about taking the synonyms and making a file for it, but I think Barry's is out of copyright, so I can do that and not violate copyright. You don't want to break the law for two reasons. First reason is we saw that in chapter 13, didn't we? Right? We don't want to be breaking the law. And the second reason is we fear the government, okay? So this is in the appendix of Barry's Greek New Testament Interlinear. If you have it, might go back there and look them over because there's some cool stuff in there and you can get some things out of it, okay? Very useful. I would also advise, there's some other synonyms and trenches. Trenches synonyms is a very useful book. If you don't have it, it's very useful, okay? All right, to bear, of course, is what tense? Bastazane.
Present.
Infinitive.
It's a present tense infinitive, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's the difference in an aorist and a present infinitive?
This is continue to do it.
Yes, it's more like making it a practice, see, continuing to do it, this present tense. And so what we have here, you ought to make this a way of thinking, a way of conducting yourself, see. Does that make sense what we're saying? Any questions or comments there?
I put obligated for that word to ought. Is that?
That's fine. I don't think obligated is wrong. It's like a debt. You owe something like that. And a debt is an obligation you have.
Okay.
So I don't think that would be wrong. Any other questions or comments there? I'm going to pick on you again. Just let you finish the whole verse now, if you will. And then we'll get
Okay.
for the, since he came in about a 1 minute late, we'll pick on Tony for the next one. All right.
To continue, it's Kai Me Tois Arkesekane. Arkesekane. That's so it means Kai and or even, but and not may is not subjective enough, and not to ourselves to please.
To please. Okay, now.
Or we would say not to please ourselves.
That'd probably be better English, wouldn't it? Better not please ourselves. This is heautos is reflexive pronoun, and it's ourselves, and so not to please ourselves. Now think about it. Please or reskane is also a present infinitive, isn't it? So again,
Yes.
and so it's just continually making it a practice to please yourself. And so we ought not be doing that. Does that make sense? So that's this difference in your present and aorist infinitive. Now most infinitives are aorist. It's an aorist loving language. So when he uses a different kind of infinitive, then that would have some meaning to it. Okay. All right. Any questions? Now remember, we don't have a future tense infinitive, so the aorist covers the future as well. Okay. Has the same kind of action. All right. The problem in chapter 14 is that the strong were trying to please themselves rather than trying to please God by giving up their liberty.
Standing up for the rights.
Yeah, stand up for their rights.
That's
Yeah,
what a lot of people do.
Yep.
Forget you, I'm standing up for my rights.
Yep. And so right here in the middle of the screen, it's obviously directed at the stronger members. Everyone agree?
Mhm.
And here's my point here. It might be saying something like, God allows me to eat the meat, and so those who object can just like it or lump it. Okay? Or I have the right to eat meat, and they're just troublemakers to object. Maybe I ought to think about, it's not really important whether I get that meat or not. It's much more important that that soul be saved, or that weaker brother. We need to think about it that way.
I think we've got a similar situation in with things like the mask.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
There are people that, are uncomfortable with those not wearing masks, and someone say, well, that's my right. I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Forget you.
Yeah. Yeah. Did everyone hear that? Tony pointed out that the wearing of the mask is similar to that today. Probably is. Okay. Now the thing is,
that conversation in our congregation in elder deacon meetings. We've had that exact conversation in our elder deacon meetings.
Yes.
About Romans 14 and the mask.
Yeah, I think it fits.
Definitely fits.
Yep. And so the thing is, if you're strong, you're going to go ahead and wear the mask and not complain about it. I'm not really convinced myself that they're that effective.
I don't either, but
I just don't worry about it. I just wear it whenever I'm out. I just put it on.
Yeah.
And I've got one here because I don't teach in it. These guys here, we're about 6 foot away from each other. But Tony and Jerry they're only 5.5 feet apart. So yeah. Okay. All right.
Don't breathe on me.
The real question is, and right on the middle of the screen, what's more important, me getting my way or the souls of the weak being saved? That's a no-brainer, isn't it?
right.
And how would Jesus have answered this question? We'd ask that. I say this, he left heaven and suffered on the cross for all. That's pretty inconvenient.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
And he didn't deserve it.
Yeah, no, he didn't.
So he had the right not to go there.
Yep, he sure did. There are two classes, those identified as the heteron, tone heteron. That's those that are different. In Romans 13:8, and that would be our neighbor and the weaker brother. Those are laid out here on the slide. Any questions or comments? The principle would also apply, this principle. This is a principle of how we conduct ourselves. And it's generic. You see, and because it's generic, it would include the wearing of the face mask. So the wearing of the face mask comes in because or things like that. I think also in 1 Corinthians 11, the women wearing a veil or wearing a head covering comes into that category. And so a godly Christian woman says, I'm not going to raise a stink over this. I'm not going to raise a fuss over it. If they think I ought to wear a head covering, I'll wear it. Does that make sense? We just go ahead and do it and don't complain. Because we think, okay, I'm doing what the Lord wants me to do. I'm trying to help save souls. I think the Lord will bless us for it. Any questions? I'm up here preaching again. Okay. All right.
Well, that's the message.
The responsibility of helping the weak to bear their burdens, bastazo, is found in other passages. Now, Galatians 6:1-2, it's found there, of course. It's also found Jesus bore the cross, John 19:17, and to care for the infirmities, and I say infirmities, that same word here, of the weak, Matthew 8:17. Since we ought to follow the example of Jesus, 1 Peter 2:21, we ought to bear the infirmities of the weak if we're strong like Jesus. And so if you think you're a strong member, you ought to be one of those that's taking the lead in this matter. Am I making sense instead of complaining about it? Any questions? All right. Well, I translated it. Now we that are strong, and this thing goes off the screen for me. we that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. Not pretty much like the American Standard, okay? But it's continually please. All right. Now, Tony, can you get the whole verse for us, please?
Skostos, Hemon, To, Placion, Arisketo, Ice, To, Agathon, Pros, Oikodomane.
Okay. All right. All right. Now, Hekostos is, of course, got a rough reading, of course, and it's each or every one. So now he made it generic. Now he points down and starts pointing his finger at each individual person with the words, of course. He's pointing his finger saying, you have the responsibility, each of us. And so now he makes it applicable to the whole church. Now here's a point that a preacher ought to remember. He needs to say, instead of you need to do this, it's need to say we need to do it, okay? We need to be doing something. And that's received much better by the people listening. Ought to please. Now here, what tense is please?
Present active, imperative.
It's imperative. It's imperative mood. It's present tense, active voice, imperative mood. Now then, if we have the imperative mood, present tense, it's a continuous action, see? Because that's the nature of the present tense. So he's saying we ought to what?
Keep on pleasing
the neighbor, see? Ought to keep on doing it. And that's the thing we do. It's just not a one-time thing. This is something we're seeking to do. And it may take our whole life. We may have to do that our whole lives. But hey, Jesus suffered on the cross. He did it too. So the neighbor is someone who is near. And that's what it's an adverb meaning near. Well, now, the Jews had a problem with this because Jesus was asked, and who is my neighbor, you know? And so the answer was, what? The Good Samaritan parable. That's the answer to the question of who my neighbor is. So that would be anybody that has need of my help in some way. Well, that would be this weak brother. Does he have need of your help? Help him get by his problem? And so I would say that would fit. The Good Samaritan parable would fit right here. Any questions? Okay. All right.
And for please, I put seek favor with. Is that too many words to put in there?
I don't think so, and not necessarily.
So each one of us seek favor with the one nearby with a view to the good or the benefit of building up.
Okay. Notice on the top of the screen up here, there's Thayer's definition. I don't have other lexicon's definitions there, but to please, to strive to please, to accommodate oneself to the opinions, desires, interests of others. Okay. So I don't think your translation is wrong. Okay. So the imperative mode is sometimes called mode by some grammarians and mood by other grammarians. So kind of be aware of that. Just difference in terminology. I'm not sure, but the difference in the mode and mood might be British versus English, okay? American English versus British English, maybe. I haven't really followed that up to see if what the background of these fellows is. But just be aware that the word mode is used as equivalent to mood in some grammarians, all right? So now this is the neighbor, and it's a neuter, it's an adverb, see? Now here, think about it a minute. The word neighbor is an adverb. Huh. So what does an adverb do? It modifies what?
The verb.
A verb. So there's some action involved in it, isn't there? Does that make sense? lot of people don't even recognize that, see? But that's a lesson in itself. It's an adverb. And he's to please, not please his neighbor for that which is good. And of course, it's got the article. So what does that tell us? It's probably the
good that they've been talking
the
about.
good
this
they've
whole
been
time.
talking about. And I think that goes back to chapter 14. Has to, see. So this is the tie-in between chapters 15:1 and 4 and 2, and also back to chapter 14.
So he'd be saying, do the good that is neighbor pleasing?
Yes. That is designed to please the neighbor. And I think the good here is giving up your liberty.
Right.
That's what I take it to be. That's my interpretation.
But it's specifically for the benefit of building them up.
Yes.
I mean, there's a reason for it too.
Yeah.
Not just because I'm gonna give in, but I mean, there's a reason.
Now, of course, can he be built up if he's not taught?
No.
No.
Edification is through the word.
Yeah, this is just,
So-
this enables you to teach. This
Gets the fuss. You don't have the fuss, so we can study the matter. I think that's
It's like Timothy being circumcised.
Yeah.
Just same idea.
Yeah. So we don't have the fuss right now. We stop. We don't do it because of the fuss, and so now we study it and get everybody educated as to what the truth is on the matter. Any questions?
Kind of the same idea that Paul had. He became all things to all men that he might win them to Christ.
Yes.
For that
I
reason.
think that's 1 Corinthians 9. I think it is. But yes, I agree. All acts are either morally good, morally evil, or neutral. And of course, he's not saying give in on something that is neutral. I mean, that is evil. Don't allow it. You can't do that. So this has to be in the realm of liberty, in the area of something that's morally neutral. We always do what's good, and we never do what's evil. And we look at something that's neutral. We say, okay, what's the effect of it going to be? If the effect of doing it is hindrance to the cause of Christ, I don't do it. If the effect of doing it is going to aid the cause of Christ, I do it. For instance, again, I'll go back to women wearing a veil or men wearing a hat whenever they're praying, or taking it off when they pray in the United States. I take it off. Does the Bible require me to do it? I think it only requires me through this passage here, that I give up my liberty and I don't want to cause someone to stumble. And you may wear a hat while you're praying and nobody gets upset. And you haven't done anything wrong then. But how do you know that nobody got upset? Okay? You don't know. And that goes back to the drinking of alcohol that I had earlier. Just how do you know? Leave it alone. Okay? Any questions? All right. So it's a morally neutral matter. Okay. And any other questions or comments? All right. Let everybody please his neighbor for that which is good unto what now?
To building up or edification.
Building up or edification. Now, what two words are put together in this word right here for oikodomene and oikodome right here? Notice here, Thayer tells us, and I think I told you earlier on this, the word in Russian for my house is moi, and that's just like Greek moi to me. In dome, my dome, my house. And so the word dome, D-O-M-E, because a lot of those old houses, I think even the Hogans of the Navajos were like they were rounded tops. That's very strong structure too. Okay. Any questions? Now, I may have the wrong tribe. It may not be the Navajo in the United States, but I remember seeing them. I've seen them in various places. Okay. Any questions or comments? So right here, this is to build a house, and oikos is house, and then demo is I build, to build. So it's the act of building up like building a house. Now, I think if we look at 1 Peter chapter 2, we can see in the Lord's church, he uses a figure of each individual Christian being a building block, a stone in the wall of that church, of that temple. And if that's the case, and I believe that that is there in 1 Peter 2, and we understand the word stone is a shaped stone. It's one that's been shaped. And so there's a difference between a rock and a stone. A stone has already been shaped. And so what we do is the shaping process, I believe, is the conversion process. And the gospel shapes us, makes us, changes us. And one of the changes is we're going to give up our liberty for the sake of the salvation of the souls of men. I give up that liberty so I can help shape someone else. And of course, the gospel is what's going to shape them. So I think here, I give up the liberty so we won't have the fuss and fight, and won't drive him away so that I can teach him. And I'll teach him the gospel and teach him the truth. And of course, hopefully he's honest enough to accept it. Okay. Any questions?
That comes to a situation in Bible studies. A lot of times I have been in situations where I was in a Bible study and I was fretting. I don't know if you know what that is, but the person that was leading the study asked for their Bibles, and it was a kind of a strange translation, but got the big fuss about the translation with me. And I could tell that it was turning the people off terribly because we were fussing over translation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's good or too good to do or not.
Well, let me suggest something. It's just my thinking, and you can take it or leave it. If you know a brother has a trouble in some area, don't bring it up publicly. Try to study with him privately.
Yeah.
Because once the fellow declares his position publicly, he has to swallow his pride. And pride can get in his way if he's not careful.
Well, I was fretting, so I didn't say anything till that was my job, to sit there and just watch their mannerisms and stuff. But you know, afterwards, I just mentioned I don't know if that's a good idea to go down that trail. It kind of got us sidetracked.
Yeah, it can. You can get sidetracked. But if you know a fellow has a wrong idea on something, maybe if you're teaching and preaching, you might lay the groundwork of the hermeneutics or other principles so that he can see the matter. What did Nathan do with David? He led him up to the point that he had to accept the truth on the matter.
Right.
And that's the principle that I think that I'm following. Any comments or questions there? I think that's the way to approach matters. Romans 14, the stronger member is giving up his liberty to keep a weaker member from violating his conscience. And so if the action itself doesn't cause him to violate his conscience, then this principle doesn't seem to apply to me, okay? We have threefold work of the church: preaching, teaching the gospel to non-members, and that's frequently called evangelism. And then we have preaching, teaching the gospel to members of the church to edify and build them up, and then engaging in acts of benevolence to both members of the church and non-members of the church. Any comments? All right. And I've seen strife over all three of these in the Lord's church in my lifetime, okay? Preaching, teaching the gospel to non-members, members, evangelism, and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I've seen strife over it. All right. Okay. The work of the church is limited by the scriptures. Remember that, of course. And so we need to always go back to the Bible. And I made a point here on the middle of the screen. This principle does not give license to the weaker member to get his way in everything. You need to understand that. And of course, if we go through this passage and we lay it out, maybe if someone's having trouble, you might study this passage, laying forth the principles, letting everybody understand it. And this fellow's sitting in the pew, and he hasn't really come out with his position on it, but you know he's got this view. Then you do all of this, lay this groundwork for him, like Nathan did to David, and try to. What you want to do is you don't like that confrontation unless you have to have it, you know. So don't force it. Try to deal with it in a more subtle way of laying the groundwork so he can see his error. And Because again, as I said earlier, I think some people, they get embarrassed to have to swallow their pride and say I was wrong. But we need to be big enough to say we're wrong when we're wrong. But sometimes it's hard to do it. And maybe a person needs to grow a bit before you do that. It takes a while to grow. I don't like to say Marion is wrong. I don't like to hear that. Okay? I'll be frank with you. Okay? All right? Now, the difference between the tenses, of course, the imperative action expresses continued action. Everyone's seen that, okay? Here's the powers and some other sources saying that. The use of the present imperative demonstrates that they had made it a practice to give up their liberties in the past. Now think about this a minute. This basically says here, if you read the top of the screen, the present imperative, the third line, indicates that the action expressed in the verb is ongoing, continued, and repeated. The aorist imperative implies the action is not ongoing or repeated. All right? Now, what he's saying is, he's saying, keep on doing this. So that tells me that they were in the habit of giving up their liberty for the sake of other people. Now think about it. If we have members of the church that are going out teaching the lost, are they not giving up their liberty? Could they be home watching TV? Yeah. Could they be home doing something else? Yes. So they've given up their liberty to do that. They may have given up their liberty by making contributions on the first day of the week in the collection plate. Well, that's giving up your liberty, see? So they've done all of that for the sake of salvation of souls. Well, you're in the habit of doing that. I think these people here were doing what was right, generally speaking, and they weren't taking the generic principle. I have been giving up my liberty to teach the lost. It's in principle I should give up my liberty to teach or to help the saved to become edified. See? And so I don't know how they were giving up their liberty before, but the present imperative implies it. That's my point. So maybe that's another way we can approach people, laying out, well, you've been doing that all these years. Here's what you've been doing in principle. You've been giving up your liberty. So why is it anything new? It's not anything new. You've been doing that already. And you haven't thought anything bad about it. So now let's just apply it over here where this right here applies. Any questions or comments? Okay. All right. Let's move ahead. Let each one of us please his neighbor with a view to his good, to edification. And I footnoted those words there. That's my translation. It's the good, the article's there, meaning the good discussed in the context. That's why I footnoted it, okay? Any questions, comments there? And of course, the word ace, now you may read that as ice or ace, depending on various grammar books pronounce it differently. And I'm not even sure we're pronouncing it right as far as what they did back in the New Testament times. But we're trying to pronounce it the same way so we can communicate a bit. Does that make sense? This is probably the pronunciation of Erasmus, probably what we use. But I'm not going to get into a fuss over it. It's not important to me. Let's just try to be as consistent as we can how we pronounce it. Let each one of us please his neighbor with a view to, that's ace or ice. I pronounce it ace. And with a view to is good. And of course, what's the view to the good? And that would be the good of somebody, and that would be the weaker brother's good. Questions? Comments? Do verse 3. Well, now, Jerry, I think we've come to you.
Okay.
If you can do that for me.
How far do you want me to go?
Why don't you just do the whole verse? We'll just
Okay.
go whole hog, okay?
Kai, gar, ho, Christos, uk, eato, eresen, hala, kathos, gegraptai, hoi, was that hoi?
Hoi.
On a dismoi, ton, on a dis own tone, say, ep es own, ep ma, or ma. I can't say that without an A.
All right. And of course, gar is what now?
Post positive,
So,
but I put, because chi, it didn't seem right, so I put and for.
okay, with the chi there, the chi could be even.
Oh, okay.
I think,
For even, that's
and,
probably.
or also, the American Standard translates it also, King James has it even.
I put also.
So,
For even the Christ did not please self,
okay.
but in the same, or just as it has been written, the reproaches of the ones reproaching me fell upon me.
And of course, now, let's look up here. This right here, please, is aorist. Huh. So now, remember the present tense is durative or continuous or linear action. So he's saying he did not even seek to please one time or at all to please himself. Does that make sense? So the aorist here kind of goes in very carefully, and it wasn't that he wasn't, by negating it, he's not negating that he made it, didn't make, he's not saying he didn't make it a practice, but it's saying he didn't make a single act. He didn't do this at all.
I kind of thought of it as a subtle highlighting or casting a light on the crucifixion.
Well, it might be. That's a possibility.
Certainly the culmination of it.
Yeah, but I've taken it differently. I have to think about it, and I wouldn't rule it out. To me, it's just saying Jesus didn't one time. Not one time did he seek to please himself in anything. He always did what was best for everybody else. So that's the way I interpret it. Okay, because it's aorist. Right? The word "u" is, of course, not. All right. Now here's the a fortiori principle from it. What is true of the lesser is true of the greater. From contraposition, we can reverse it. What's not true of the greater is not true of the lesser. Okay? That works. If Christ is greater than us, which he is, then what Jesus did not do is what we should not do. Okay? Christ greater than us, and he did not seek to please himself in any sense. And when it was salvation of souls was involved, therefore, as our pattern, we should not seek to do it at all. Okay? That's my interpretation. Any questions? Continue on now. Now, look at but, Allah. And of course, we have day and but, and Allah is but. But Allah, as we have on the screen here, it's something that's a different set or different category. So here, see. So what he did is he accepted the reproaches of all the reproaches of them. See, that fell on me. So he didn't please himself. He went, as Tony said, he went to the cross there. That's where you probably got it from this context here. Okay, and but I've taken it to be anything, including the cross, just any single thing. Okay, any comments there? Now the reproaches, it's written as perfect tense, which perfect does what now? It's what kind of action, remember?
So something that occurred in the past is still true today.
Okay, so that's what he has. So what's written in the past is still true, see?
Right.
And the reproaches is like throwing something back in your teeth, okay? All right? We can go and study that word a little more, but the reproaches of those, the ones reproaching me, see? And so they're actually, one's a noun, and the other one is a verb or participle. So but they're from the same root word. And the reproaches, those who reproach thee, it would be the Father, God the Father. So the people that were willing to kill Jesus, they weren't obeying the Father either. So when they would do such things, it fell. Of course, there's areas upon me. Now look at the me. We pointed this out before. This form here would be that's emphatic. Now I'm going to type it up here on the screen, let you see. If we had me, and I'll drag across it, and hopefully I can find it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, symbol fonts up there, right there. I don't like this mouse that I got with this computer. Well, I'm gonna quit.
Why is,
Mu epsilon without an accent mark on it, okay. Go ahead, Jerry.
why is the one thee and the other one me?
All right.
They're both accusative. Singular.
There it is. That right there is me, and right down here is me. And I'll get back to Jerry's question in a minute. This one down here, notice it has an accent mark on it, plus it has the epsilon at the beginning. This one up here has no accent mark on it. And the one that's unaccented is the normal, and the one down here at the bottom is emphatic. All right? So he's emphasizing, he's speaking emphatically. And Persbacher tells us that, other sources tell us that too. So that's what we have here. He's using emphatic form. So be aware of that, that's emphatic. All right, now, Jerry, your question.
Oh, both of those are accusative. So why is one of them thee and the other one me?
Well, thee is third person, and me is first person.
Oh, did I get? I forgot to put that on.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You is second person. Thee is second person. I'm sorry. So we got
Okay.
different persons.
I just missed that.
All right. Any other questions now? And this is peepto. Let's look at this right here. Peepto is to fall. Right there. That's to fall. And then peepto is emphatic form. It's to fall upon. Okay. And peepto is to fall. So that's to fall upon. Now look here at this right here. This passage is from Psalm 69. But look here at all the places that word is, well, lovely. Look at all the places that passage, at least in the 69th Psalm, is quoted. Right? Man, this becomes part of the context of this passage, I think. And that's my conclusion. This is in your file here. You'll be able to get this. When I finish this chapter, I'll give you this electronic copy of this file. I don't want you cheating on it, having a copy beforehand. So, any questions? Our quote here is Psalm 69:9. Well, verse 9 is also quoted in John 2:17. So definitely that's context. That's I would call that even near context because it's quoted from the same passage. But Psalm 69:4, 12, 21, and 22 and 25 are all quoted elsewhere in the New Testament. So I would say they're part of the context of this passage. Any questions? I think this is probably what the Holy Spirit had in mind through Paul when he wrote Philippians 2, 1 through 8 as well. Okay? So that's what I think. Right? For even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproach of the one reproaching you fell upon me. And notice I capitalize the pronouns when they refer to deity in my translation. Okay. Right. Any questions or comments? Probably we get one more verse. Jerry, did you get through verse 4?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we're gonna lay it on right here, down here now. As I do, I have these in parallel for your study. I think that helps us. We can go back and forth between the two passages and see them parallel to one another and how they fit together. So you need to read in Psalm, in this passage, you need to read the verses both before and after it, the ones up here and the ones after it, so you can put it in context. So that helps to do it. I don't know if that's useful to you, but it's useful to me, and I just do it. So you're kind of stuck with it. That's what I've done. Okay. Any questions?
Mhm.
And I have down here, Romans 15:4, a passage that I've quoted a lot in my preaching. I think I've quoted it right, but in context, but this is a familiar passage to many preachers, okay? So, Chris, I'm gonna go back and pick on you again, okay? Why don't you take the first half down to there, and I'll let Tony do the last half. Is that all right?
Sounds good.
All right.
Hosa gar pro egraphe eistain hemeteron didascalane pro egraphe. That was it. Pro egraphe. Okay, so whatsoever is osa, and gar is for post-positive. So for whatsoever was written in, or with a view to then our instruction was written for us.
Okay. Now, the words was written, they're different. They're not grapho, are they?
Yes, I have as passive aorist.
Okay, that's true. They are aorist. But I want you to notice here what word they're from. It's not grapho, it's prographo.
Mm-hmm.
Now, pro is a preposition meaning before, isn't it?
Oh, right.
So that's where they get written before time with the word pro in there.
Gotcha.
That makes sense to everybody? So the
Yeah,
things that were written before time, well, I would ask you a question now. He just quoted Psalm 69. So that would obviously be one of the things he's written before time, right? And of course, I would say it's a generic principle, and the entirety of the Old Testament can be useful to us. Okay. So whatsoever things were written before time, and okay, and how they were forewritten. They were written before time. See, and one is a noun, one is a prographo, and then prographo again. This is aorist passive, and this right here is aorist passive. Both of them were written. They were written for what reason?
Instruction.
All right. Now, this is the word "our" is a little bit different. It's kind of an emphatic form of the word "hemes," and so again, it's an adjective. See, it's become an adjective here, and it's comparative, right? And so what we have here is this is for our and kind of emphatic learning. And that's didaskalia, didaskalion, and that's teaching. It could be doctrine. It's the same word translated doctrine as well. Okay, doctrine or to teach us for our learning.
I put instruction.
Instruction will be all right. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But it's also translated doctrine or teaching, what's taught. It's what's taught. Right. And now I have two other passages I want to throw in. 1 Corinthians 10:6 and 10:11. The Old Testament scriptures also serves to be examples to us. So we have to ask ourselves, what value is it? Well, it has examples in it, and that's very helpful to us as well. Any questions or comments before we go finish the verse? All right. Now I'll put the mouse right there to the end of the verse. You would, Tony, please.
Okay. Heina, dia, tais, hupo, mones,
Okay.
kai, tais, para, kla, sales, tone, graphone, tang, el tida, ex omen.
All right, now, he knows, of course, telling a purpose or a result clause, one of the two.
That for that reason.
So probably that would be in order that or purpose, wouldn't it? Right? Purpose. In order that through. Now, here, patience, there's two words that are synonyms, and Trench is synonym. I have it right in the middle of the screen here. I'll highlight it a little bit right in there. We have our word here, this is hupomone, and that word there is, it's different than microthumia, Trench. Hupomone deals with things. So it's translated patience. I'm patient with my car whenever it won't start, okay? It's a thing. And macrothumia is my patience with respect to people. So again, we have the two words here being used. So, I might get sick, or my relatives might get sick, my children might get sick, and I have to deal with that problem. Or someone steals my car or something, I have to deal with it, and I have to be patient. And don't let myself sin as a result of it. Does that make sense? So I need to get control of myself with regard to things. I saw a guy, and I watched him do it. His car wouldn't start, and he took a hammer and started hitting his car. I thought, what an idiot, Now he's got a dented car, and
It still won't start.
And the car didn't do it on purpose. It just failed, something mechanical failed in it, Thought, this guy's not very smart. Okay. Don't let things get the best of you. Okay. The weather, the ice storm we just had, don't let it get the best of you. It's just stuff. It's gonna all be burned up anyhow. Okay. Any questions? I hated my trees got broken and everything, but they're just trees, and I know that they'll all pass away anyhow. Okay, and I'll take care of them whenever I can.
No, I'm thinking the sooner the better.
Patience, and of course, hupomone is found. Look at all the places in Romans that this word is found. Right here, right there. And it's got the article here, so it may be looking back to Romans 8:25, where the verb form of it's used, or the verb form in 12:12, Romans 12:12. So that's the verb form of that word. So through patience and comfort. Now, okay, what's that next word that you got there? Paraklesis. Okay.
Exhortation. Oh, yeah. I was
Yeah.
with the thing.
Well, that's that one word that can be translated either way. Okay. Now then, let me go back to let you see this. The last 2 or 3 verses. I don't remember which one it is, but go to the last 3 verses of Acts 4, and you'll see the American Standard King James Version translate it differently. And so there's a man named Barnabas And it's translated by one translation, son of exhortation, and by another translation, Mary said in King James, I don't remember which one's which, son of consolation. The exhortation or consolation, which is it? Well, it can be either.
Which side you're on.
I put encouragement.
Yeah. And again, so you're taking it like exhortation, see?
Mhm.
It's being done. Right? It could be received too. See, patience and comfort of the scriptures. Do the scriptures encourage you or do they console you?
Well, I think he's
If you're in trouble, they'll console you. And if you need to grow, they'll exhort you. And so they do both. And again, I think it's a contextual problem as to which way you translate it. Go
they're
ahead.
supposed to provide instruction to those people. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
They need instruction
Yeah.
to get them out of their weakness.
So I put it could be consolation. And again, that gets back to the fourth chapter. I forgot what verse, but about verse 32, I'm thinking of Acts 4. What are you looking at Acts 4 there, Tony?
Yeah, New King James has encouragement.
Encouragement.
On that, yeah.
Okay. So what verse was it?
Verse 36.
36, okay. All right, I was 4 verses off, but just read the whole chapter and it'll edify you. Okay. All right. Now here, it could be comfort, it could be consolation, it could be exhortation, see? It could be any of those. Because again, the context has to tell us which way to translate it, okay? All right. There's a rule of textual criticism, and I can't pronounce the Latin, so I'm not even going to try. But the most difficult reading is the most probable reading. That's their rule. And what we have here is they didn't take the most difficult reading. They took the easier reading. And the most difficult reading fits with the text that I'm using. So what I run into is they have this rule, but they don't follow that rule unless that rule goes along with the text that they're wanting to use. I've seen it over and over. They repeatedly violate that rule. I think they're just dishonest is what I think. I think that they may not even realize that they're being dishonest. They may just have swallowed this view and they use it and they're not thinking logically. Some people don't think logically. Okay. Any questions? If you have my notes on the introduction to the Bible, I deal with this in those notes. Okay. If you don't have them, let me know and I'll send them to you. Right? And so it's right here. We're down here of the scriptures, the writings. We might what?
We might have hope.
Okay, but the hope has the article, see?
Might have,
So
yeah, the hope.
It might be the hope of the context, see? All right? Somewhere in that context. So we got to kind of look back a little bit. And might have is subjunctive mood, isn't it, from echo to have? We might have, see?
Mhm.
So it's
Might
probably
have.
conditional, see?
Might
Somehow.
have. Right.
All right? We learn, however, that God is faithful keeping his promises from the Old Testament.
Mhm.
And since God is immutable, Hebrews 6:18, he's going to keep his covenants today. That's like he's always done. See?
Mhm.
So we can trust God. While it's true the patriarchal Mosaic laws were done away when Jesus died, there are eternal principles in these laws. My study of them tells me that the patriarchal Mosaic law, the principles of right and wrong are still the same. It's always been wrong to lie and steal and murder and so forth, and it's still wrong. Okay?
Mhm.
And there may be little nuances that are a little different, but basically the moral principle, moral code is basically the same.
They're just facts.
Yeah, they're facts. So I translated for whatsoever things are written aforetime were written for our learning. The praise and coming to Scripture might have hope, just like the American Standard. I went with that. And I footnoted those, Greek as many as, whatsoever, or many things as. I pointed out that this pronoun here is emphatic. Let's go back and see it for our learning. And for our learning. Oh yeah, this is an emphatic form, more emphatic than hemes, okay? So that's the point I make there with that. Even our learning, see. Any questions? I start with chapter 15, verse 5. We've gone roughly an hour, and we'll stop there and begin with chapter 15, verse 5. Any questions before we stop? Any comments or questions either? All right.
Hey, Marion.
Yes.
So where do they come up with the most complicated is what the most likely translation?
Because they argue that the translators, the scribes that were making copies was trying to smooth the text out.
Okay.
And they would make it simpler. And so they'll take a rough text over one that's not as rough. Okay, that's their reasoning. And there's some truth to that, if indeed the scribes were corrupting the text. See, but I think most of the scribes probably respected the text and weren't corrupting it on purpose. The questions? All right, we'll call a halt to it. Let me see. I didn't stop the recording, did I?